Okay, back at it. Another episode of the More To It podcast with Hail Varsity Magazine, hailvarsity.com. I am Jay Moore, the host, and I am pleased to be joined by Mr. Brandon Vogel, live from Tennessee right now, catching up with me. My man, how you been? And how you hanging in there during these unprecedented times?
Oh, pretty good. All things considered, I work from home permanently. So, well, not permanently, but the vast majority of the time. So it's gotten to me. I came into this being like, I'm ready to go. This is what I do every day anyway. But not being able to go some places has gotten to me a little bit more, but all things considered, pretty easy on my end compared to a lot of others.
Yeah, no, same here. I've been working from home as well. It's other than not being able to go places, the wife's still going into work. I'm still get some work done, recording the podcast, obviously, and the weather's been good. And the golf courses have stayed open in Nebraska, thank God, because if they weren't open in Nebraska, I'd be going crazy, that's for sure. But you always, without any sports, not being able to go anywhere, we always, you always tend to have to put your attention towards to some other place. Obviously, with your work with Hail Varsity and all those things, but we know you and I, in general, a lot of other people like the barbecue. We like dabble in the beers and the whiskeys and so forth. So let's dive into that. How have you ventured anything new or tried anything new? Or are you still just kind of finding what you know what you do and you're keep on doing it well?
Yeah, I haven't got, well, with one exception. So on the barbecue front, I've been doing a lot more of it because it's an excuse to get outside. It takes a lot of time. So both of those things are pretty interesting to me at the moment, but I haven't ventured too far outside of the kind of ribs, brisket, pulled pork range. So stick with the knowns there. For Memorial Day, though, the local grocery store, I got an email and they had tomahawk beef chops on sale, which I've never seen at a grocery store before. And at first I was like, this is ridiculous. Who's like going to buy this and cook this in their home? And then I bought it and cooked it in my home because I was like, yeah, it kind of is a good deal. And I don't know if I'm ever going to buy one of these again. So I
feel like Fred. Do you feel like Fred Flintstone?
I did, and I like went all out and cooked the thing and like cut it off. So it was for two, and cut it off the bone, but kept the bone on for presentation purposes. So yeah, it was it's things like that where you're kind of like, okay, everybody's trying to do what they can to help, and you try and make staying home a little bit fun. And that was one of those nights. It was a good night.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I haven't done much. I have a Traeger, so I'm more of a griller. I just don't have the patience, I guess, for the smoking aspect of it. A lot of people have way more patience. Are able to just. I'm kind of have to be doing a lot of things, which I could do. I could throw it on the smoker, get some things done, but I don't know. I feel like I have to be around it a lot more, otherwise something's going to go wrong. Any new beers you got into? Any new whiskeys? Any new things on that front?
So towards the beginning of this, we realized we needed a liquor cabinet restock. It's been a long time, so we kind of did a big one of those and had a cocktail night every couple of days. So that was good, but kind of stuck with the classics there. Beers, it seems like there's new ones that pop up all the time. There's a local brewery here in Tennessee called Heaven and Ale that's starting to get a little bit wider release. It's really good. Know the guys that run it a little bit, and they're super cool guys, and they make really interesting beers. And there's another one in Sparta, Tennessee, which is a little bit it's about 45 minutes away. Just like two brothers who started a brewery called Calf Killer, named after a nearby river, that they do some really great stuff. So, try and support those local ones as you can. And it's usually been pretty good. How about
you? I got a buddy of mine who is, I call him a beer dork, but he does it all. Like, he knows breweries from all over the nation. I mean, supposedly he had a beer. They call them beer shares, I guess, is what they get a bunch of guys that bring beers over, and they had a bunch of beers from breweries in Florida, and they said the cost of all these beers was like $5,000. one beer was like $500, a can of beer. There's these rare types, and he's just. I've dabbled in so much new stuff lately because, we'll play golf, and I play golf with them all the time, and it's like, hey, stop over, let's try this, and I've tried. I can just go down the list. I can't even tell you. I mean, I've got into, a lot of the new hazier IPAs, more of your New England style. That's more my flavor, a lot more fruitier. Yep. You're not so heavy, not so hoppy, but so like, one of my favorites, One Man Mosh Pit. It's out of Minneapolis, Surly Brewing, really good. That's been one of my favorites here lately. Some of the zip line stuff here in town locally, that's been one of my favorites. But his stuff he has, I mean, there's a brewery called is it Scratch Town in Des Moines. He has a bunch of good beers from there. I've tried them all. Give me the hazier New England style. I can't do the darks. I can't do the porters. I can't really do those. It's really just those type of IPAs, and then like your normal lighter beers, which he thinks are the beer guys think is junk. But I've tried more than I'm usually stick to what I know, but I've definitely ventured out here in the last 6 months trying new stuff. So it's been good.
Yeah, a classic New England IPA is kind of perfect for this time of year too. Mm-hmm. It's still got a good punch, but it feels pretty light. Like I've gotten to the point where I like really appreciate a well-made, like just kind of plain Pilsner. Mm-hmm. Something like that. Like Heaven and Ale, one of the local brewers that I mentioned in Chattanooga, makes a beer called Chatty Light. And it's obviously playing on kind of what inspired it, but it's just like super good and super drinkable and perfect on a hot day. So I was really deep into beer, a while ago, to the point where, like a long time ago, where I homebrewed a little bit, and it's just exploded to the point now where like like you're talking about, there's breweries that put out those limited releases that are going for hundreds of dollars for bottles, and like I just can't get that far into it, but still enjoy a good beer.
Yeah, that's a deep hole. I mean, I'm telling you, these guys are pulling up at these breweries and being there at 4 a.m. for a release at 1 o'clock to make sure they get their 2 allotments or something like that. And I'm just like, whoa, that's some deep stuff. And I just I like those, but I still love a good Coors Light. Whatever it is, and I still, I mean, the whiskeys, I've stick to my normal, but this time of year, I don't know about you, but I like tequila. I love a good, damn near tequila on the rocks if it's really good. Maybe it's some fresh lime squeeze in there. That's one of my guilty pleasures this time of year, and it's been really guilty here as of late.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like tequila's, I'm not as well versed in tequila as I am whiskey, and when I do get a good one, I'm kind of like, I should be more into this because there's some really good ones out there.
Yeah, I sat one of the local restaurants here in Lincoln. I sat and talked to the bartender, and he's well versed in it, and just talking about, you have your silvers, your reposados, your añejos, mezcals. I can't do; they're too smoky. But just the processes of them, and like, what's the most expensive tequila you can buy? And it's like, yeah, you can spend $1,500 if you want a bottle of tequila. It's like aged 30 years and like whiskey barrels or whatever, it could be. And I'm just like, holy smokes. I knew you could spend some money on whiskey, but I didn't realize you could spend that much money on tequila. And I would sure like to try it, but I don't know if I'm willing to pay for
it. Yeah, that's always a tough one. That's the one where you got to find that right buddy who's like, yeah, I've got it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, correct. Let's so without the sports, and obviously we've probably all been drinking a little too much than we should have during this time frame. But one thing that's helped me stay sane, and I know you, the sports junkie you are, and had a great appreciation, as we all have, as I've had, and helped me get through this crazy time. We definitely, before we move into college football talk, Nebraska talk, we got to hit on this Last Dance, the 30 for 30 episodes, and the episodes that were put out on Sunday nights, man, and just it brought me back to like being 9 to 14 all over again. Just a complete. You and I aren't too far off in age, so I think that takes us right back to our prime years of the card collecting and all the great things, and just watching Jordan just dominate for damn near a decade.
Yeah, it did the exact same thing to me. Like, it took me straight back to childhood, and I know that, like, a lot of people were Jordan fans at that time. I was like full on obsessed. I still remember our basement was unfinished. It just had like a roll of carpet out there, and it was perfect for me and my brother, because we could basically like play baseball down there if we wanted to, and it didn't matter because nothing was finished. But we also had like a 6 foot, hoop down there. And I remember taking duct tape and like taping out a lane and putting 23 in the middle of it. I cut up Sports Illustrated, cut out all the photos of Michael Jordan and like put them on the walls. And like, I was just a hoops junkie at that time. We used to have one of the big old satellite dishes where it would literally move in the sky and you just had to watch it and get to where it was going. But it had sports channels to Chicago. So like, I'm 10 years old and I'm watching like 80 Bulls games a year. Like, it was just crazy. So this really was like nostalgia fuel for me. I think more than like the kind of, it didn't reveal that much to me. I mean, it was interesting to hear Jordan's own words on it. But I was kind of like, yeah, that's kind of what I thought he was like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's what, looking back, I mean, when you're rewinding and going through those time frames of the Pippen, you watch, you're the big Bulls fan, but you remember all those players. I mean, I remember the Pippen, obviously Jordan, you remember Bill Cartwright, you remember Horace Grant, I remember Steve Kerr, but some of those guys, I'm like, I totally forgot that they played on the Bulls. And I imagine you weren't the same. Could you go back and recite all those rosters from back in that time frame?
I could come pretty close, which maybe I shouldn't be proud of, but I kind of watched it and I was like, oh yeah, there's Rory Sparrow, and I was like, oh, I forgot about. Well, I remembered Stacey King, but like I feel like oh gosh, there's a guy I was forgetting who was like a 14th man, like always in street clothes, like big center that I can't remember now. So I guess I don't remember all of them, but Ron Harper, Scotty Burrell, who was a big part of that, which was kind of crazy. It's yeah, I was really deep into it. I think it was for my 10th birthday. I sent a letter to the Chicago Bulls office, however I found that address at that time. Sent a letter to BJ Armstrong, and he sent me back a signed card. It's actually right here on my desk. It showed up on my birthday. I was like, wow, BJ Armstrong is the best. So yeah, I was pretty deep in the rosters for those Bulls teams.
How, you're from out in western Nebraska now? Were you able to get your hands on pairs of the new Jordans? They come out every year.
Yeah, I did. Somehow, some way. It was usually a Christmas gift, and that was kind of all I wanted. That was more towards middle school and high school. So I think there was a stretch there from the 8s to the 12s or 13s that I probably had it every year. Went over to Denver because that's closest for where I grew up. To watch Jordan play against the Nuggets. Definitely remember wearing Jordans to that I had just bought in Denver. So I was full on obsessed.
Did you have any of those original ones that people are flipping now for that look like hell, but are flipping for $3,000 on eBay?
No, that's actually the crazy thing. I kind of keep things by nature, and 5-6 years ago. So I still had all of those Jordans, and I gave some to my nephews. I didn't know why they wanted them, and still had 2 or 3 pairs. And I was like, what are these ratty Jordans worth? And basically just kind of put them on eBay and took whatever first bid I got, and now they're probably even in bad shape worth a couple $100 each. So got out of the market too early on that one.
Yeah. Favorite Jordans to come out.
I feel like you almost have to take the 1s and the 11s off the table.
Yeah, I was just saying the 11s are mine, but that's not even close. The greatest shoe Like I still see them and people are wearing them. Like, oh my god! Like, and I have never owned a pair to this day. You know, I was fortunate enough when I got into the NFL. I was a Nike guy, and I'd had a few X amount of dollars a year to spend on Nike stuff, and I would buy all the Jordans. That's kind of back when they were starting to re-release stuff in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. So at one time I think I had about 25 pairs of Jordans, just from all the new releases and the old releases and stuff like that. But by far the 11s. But if you want to take the 11s out of it for now, then I would probably have to say, I don't know, the 13s are pretty good.
Yeah. I really liked the 12s too, which isn't like the most eye-popping one. It had the black panel on the side of the foot. And I just, as I look at those more, and as I look at those more and more, and like the ones kind of unassailable, the threes up there. I really liked the 5 the most, probably as a kid, but now when I take a fresh look back at them, that 12 was really good, and had to follow up the 11, which was not an easy task.
See, like now I'm looking back, like I like the 10s too.
Yep.
The 10s were good because that's what he wore when he came back out of retirement. We're in 45, and I was like, God, those are sneaky good too. Like, I mean, really, I've never been a big fan of the 1s. I'm just not like.
Yeah.
The 2s are better. Like the 3s are great. The 3s are phenomenal. What ones did he wear when they played Barkley and the Suns? God, those were good. Like they kind of had the goofy, almost like splattered paint design on them. Like I thought those were like kind of my favorites. Like, I was in like 3rd or 4th grade back then. I'm like, my buddy had them. Like, oh, you dog, you have, and so those have always kind of been sneaky my favorite too.
Yeah, were those the ones with the straps?
Yeah,
crisscross straps.
Yeah. Those were good.
Those were good.
Those were.
They really are. Like I stopped paying attention. Like once I kind of got into college a little bit, so I'm not as up to date on what's come since then. But you've got a solid like 15 shoe run there.
I think Tinker Hatfield was like the main guy who designed all the shoes for Nike back then. I mean, what a legend! Just creating that, just working with him, and just knowing that. Yep, I created the most legendary shoe ever to come out. I mean, we got to talk about this for a second. Him almost wanting to go with Adidas, but goes to Nike, and they're like, oh, we hope to get like 250,000 sold out of these shoes. And obviously they like quintuple what they've been making.
Yeah, they probably did. It really is. And that was one of the good parts of the document. I mean, it was all good, but I really enjoyed that as someone who was like used to be in that sneaker world and or like used to care about it. I was never in it, I guess. Just to talk about, because like Adidas was it was a bigger brand than Nike at that point, but wasn't huge in basketball. And Nike was like, man, we need something to happen here. And then the Jordan 1 just goes crazy to the point where, like, I mean, it seems like they release a new version of them almost every week at this point. It's just kind of unassailable.
Yeah, it was so good. And I didn't even watch like the Lance Armstrong one. People say it's good, but I'm like, it can't live up to The Last Dance. Like the only thing I think could live up to The Last Dance for me if they've ever released the one about the 90s Nebraska football team that they have recorded, but ESPN won't release, that would live up to it. But that was so well done, and just have the footage. I mean, nowadays have that footage for the whole season. Having people allow you. I mean, they'll Hard Knocks will give you, some footage during camp, but to have cameras there for you for all 82 games on the planes, traveling. I mean, I don't think that happens anymore.
I don't think it does, and I don't know if it could ever have the same impact. Like, I don't know if we could ever get to a point now, like if we're going to do, the Lakers now or whatever, the Patriots, pick your team. Like, there's just so much access with people having their own ability to publish content and put stuff out there that it would never feel like something from the vault in the same way that this did, I don't think. And, that's some good to that, some bad to that. I just think it really is kind of a time capsule more than in just the most literal way in that, probably won't see many more of these.
Yeah, it was very well done. All right. Let's transition now into what we now pretty sure what's going to happen is college football. Take me back to a month ago. How confident is Brandon Vogel that college football is going to be played?
More confident than not, but I just still didn't have any idea how it was going to happen. It always kind of felt like one of those things. And as we got deeper and into some of the stories about like athletic department finances and just the impact on higher education in general, it kind of felt like they almost have to try. Like they have to come up with an effort to play it, for better or worse. And, nobody knows right now if that's the right decision or the wrong decision. I don't know that there is a right or wrong decision to be made. You just got to kind of decide how much risk you're willing to deal with, and how much you can and can't. So it seemed like it was moving to that. The universities came out first, and my wife is a college educator. So I saw it from that side as well, like the discussion she was having. And it seemed like it was building towards, we've got to do everything we can to try and be open in the fall, and hopefully it remains safe. And if it doesn't, we'll decide that then. But so it's, I'm very much happy selfishly to have college football in my life again. I love it as much as almost anything else. That said, try to be aware of the risk to it too. So,
right. I think God, it would have been. It's just funny. We're recording. It's June 1st right now, and it still feels like it's like March something to me right now. Just weird. But I played golf with Scott Frost. Mid to about early April, I think. And I asked him, we're kind of in the midst of everything. I go, what's the best case scenario for you guys right now? He goes, that we're able to get kids back on campus June 1 and be able to start things June 1. And here we are, and they are able to step foot on campus June 1. And that's pretty remarkable to come this far and say, well, this is happening.
Yeah, it is. It'll be interesting, as someone who kind of looks at things with a statistical bent a lot of the time. I'm actually interested in what you think about this. It seems to me like it's going to be a chaotic season, just kind of across the board. And like, I don't know, what do you think? Like, what is the impact of, okay, so maybe we don't know how much time at this point the players are going to get in. Like, it seems likely that they're going to kind of extend the window for fall camp and maybe allow them to do more than 4 weeks. But like, just not having spring, not having summer conditioning in the traditional sense, like, I don't know, what kind of disruption is that?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit, but once you kind of step foot on campus and you get around the guys, and I think you kind of get back into, I guess, I hate, and it's been used too much now, the new normal. There's some bigger issues you gotta look at, and some hurdles you have to go through. But I don't know. I just think if I'm putting myself in their shoes and knowing that this is going to happen, I'm just ecstatic that I'm just able to get back on campus and get back to work and get around my teammates. That's for me. Is it going to be different? But I think well, knock on wood for heaven's sake, that September 5th, that football is going to be played. And now, do I think there's going to be let's say winter conditioning? I mean, you look back at, summer conditioning. I look back, we started summer conditioning right about this time. We always had, school usually got out mid-May. You always had your pre-session school, and then, which were all voluntary. A lot of kids went home. Some kids, I always stayed back and attended pre-session classes. But once that first 5 weeks or part of summer, that's when workouts started. That was usually about after Memorial Day weekend. So they're not that far off technically. Yeah. It's just the fact that they weren't able to go through spring ball. That was a huge hit. You only get 2 practices in. You don't get the training and all the stuff, the working out with the weight staff. But they're not, to be honest, they're not that far off. I just think it's going to get cut a little short because usually you start camp 1st of August. I know they kind of start a little earlier because they don't allow 2 days anymore. But, you usually go up till you get a solid month in. You work till 4th of July. You get maybe a little time off. You have maybe 3 weeks left. And we always had a week off before, camp would start. So they're not that far off. And I know the kids have been working out for the most part. So they're going to get the biggest body of work. It's just how early is training camp going to start, in my opinion. Is it going to be July 15th, maybe, or is it going to be July 21st, whatever the date may be, so they can maybe get 8 to 10 more practices, in meetings of maybe some non-padded work, some group work, or just, almost like OTAs are in the NFL, just to, help them get over, not having spring ball, because that's pretty much what it is. So I don't think, looking at the time frame, I don't think it's going to affect them that much because they're young. If kids have been out of shape, in my opinion, they're able to bounce back pretty quick. It's not like myself being almost trying to hop back into shape. I'm gonna need a little time. I'm gonna need a little extra R&R to get back in there. But hell, these kids are 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. I mean, they're able to shed some pounds and get back in it rather quickly. So I don't think they're going to miss that big a beat. It's just the biggest challenge, I think, for a player now is just that training camp grind. It's like, oh my gosh, and I don't know how they handle it with summer school and what they're trying to do with online classes and whatnot, what they normally be doing. But it's just like training camp's already a grind. Then you add, another 8 to 10 days to it, and you're just like, oh my gosh, when are we finally gonna be able to play Purdue? That'd probably be the biggest annoyance or hiccup or hurdle mentally as a player if I put myself in that position.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the next big question for college football in general is, okay, are they going to open that up for additional, what would be fall practices? Do you open it up for meeting time only? I mean, I think even something like that could be helpful just to get players back. If you're worried about, say, 6 weeks of fall camp instead of 4, and that's kind of up to the individual coaching staffs to manage, I guess. But that'll be an interesting one. Heck of a year to start off the season with a conference game.
Yeah, no kidding, right? See, I don't think, in my opinion, the difference of an extra 2 weeks, if you can't get ready to play a season in 4 weeks, then you get way bigger issues. I mean, all the attention you can focus on it, and I mean, that's more than plenty. I mean, that's in my opinion. So they shouldn't have too much. It's just they're going to be able to overcome. I think they're going to get caught up just fine in my opinion. Everyone back on campus, I think. I would like to think so. I don't, because there's been a lot of excuses for poor play in the last couple of years, and I don't think that should be one. In my opinion, if they keep on this trend here, starting up this fall.
Yeah, I'm already kind of girding myself for that. Not saying from Nebraska fans, I'm just saying in general, there are going to be teams out there that maybe fall a little short of expectations, and you can be sure that the shortened off season or the disrupted off season is the problem. And that's probably not it. And that's an interesting point too.
Yeah.
6 weeks is a lot of practice time. To practice for 6 weeks without a game, that would be a mental toll as much as a physical toll, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I look back. God, NFL training camp is about 6 weeks. So they don't start till after Labor Day. But you have 4 preseason games to kind of throw in there and kind of break things up. You don't have that. You can only scrimmage against your own team for so many times in practice. You're going to lose your mind, and you almost do already in training camp. You can't wait to play someone different. It's crazy, but I think they're going to be able to get their body of work in. I really do. I don't think they're going to miss other than just being screwy and just kind of everyone gets back on campus at the same time. So what do we do now? But I think get these kids a week to get their legs underneath them. And I think it's just going to be really everything else except maybe some smaller workout groups. I really do. I think it's almost back to status quo for the most part. Down at Memorial Stadium.
Yeah. I mentioned the Purdue game. It's kind of different from the normal start, but I mean maybe that's a good thing. Who knows? I mean, you have a game that's a real game. It's not Idaho State's not rolling into town. There's no chance of taking that lightly. So it'll be interesting. The Big Ten's moving more that direction to have earlier conference games, and as just a fan of college football, I love getting games like that early on.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's been. Oh, I do. Because nothing. Any football is great, but let's be honest. When well, for Nebraska, they need to get as many wins as possible, and I'll take whatever they can. But Alabama plays Louisiana Monroe. It's like, it's even worse when they're playing them in mid-November. Let's be honest. But yeah, you get better competition. It's just better off for everyone. So we're just kind of talking about what college football will look like. Could you imagine being Bill Moose or any athletic director or people within the athletic department trying to figure out how they're going to limit fans or what that's going to look like? I mean, we got to get that into that a little bit, because that is a huge part of college football, the atmosphere. And I could not imagine playing a game in front of no fans. That'd be really hard in my opinion. But what the process of trying to figure out what that number is, how they would go about finding a number and making, and who gets the tickets, who doesn't get the tickets, how this going to work. I mean, what logistical nightmare that they have to deal with right now.
Yeah, there's so many contingency plans going on that I think it probably would make any person's head spin, because they've got to prepare for, okay, if the stadium's full, like, how do we make sure everyone feels safe? If it's not full, like, I think the biggest one with that is who gets tickets, like, and especially in a place like Nebraska. And like, every program out there has like their kind of big money, like, real booster people they got to try and take care of, but you can't do just that. It's really hard. And like, so if we look at this just kind of like in a vacuum of, okay, social distancing is still important. It's still in place. So you basically got to reduce capacity to where people can be that far apart. Like, I mean, it cuts these stadiums down to like a fifth of what they are, I think. Mm-hmm. I saw one, so is that better than no fans? I mean, and the other part of it is of course revenue. Like, of course it's better from that point of view. So they're trying to balance all those things. I really, a month or two ago, it seemed like, well, if they're going to play, it's going to have to be with nobody in the seats or severely restricted. But I just don't know how real of that option that was for these ADs across the country, because a large, it's a big revenue question. And mm-hmm. when a home game's worth $10 million, you're not going to probably be there this year, but you still want to get as close as you can. So again, you just got to kind of balance the factors and do the best you can.
Yeah, I think, what is it? A home game from Memorial Stadium brings in, is it $30 million, I believe, with tickets and concessions. Just the city of Lincoln alone, it brings in $8 million every Saturday to the economy. Yep. I mean, that's just, it's the impact. I don't know. Do you ever think it will just be, I don't know, kind of thinking on the top of my head right now, just, hey, it's come on, come all. If you don't feel safe, stay at home. Could you ever perceive that being, in 2 months?
I could see that. So far, like a lot of the ADs and even the conference levels are saying, like, it'll all depend on local regulations, and those will be different place to place. But that's the other thing, if you open it up. So like where I live now, restaurants have been allowed to open for a couple of weeks now. Some of them have, some of them haven't. And it's kind of, it's not like just because they're able to be open, people have been flooding in and it's back to mm-hmm. normal. Would it be the same with football? I mean, football has time on its side, so that's good. We've still got a little less than 100 days to that first weekend, so maybe things feel significantly different then. But that might be what it is, and just see what you get that way.
Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, you're so many. I just don't know how you tell certain people that. I mean, you've been a season ticket holder for, and maybe that's what they limit to. I don't know. I don't have the numbers in front of me. Like, how many season ticket holders are at Nebraska versus like single game? I don't know. I'm pretty sure that I feel like they're almost damn near all season ticket holders at Nebraska for the most part. So, because some places like, oh, we're just going to honor season ticket holder. Those one games, they're not going to be able to come this year, or we're just not going to allow those tickets. But at a place in Nebraska, I mean, people have probably missed a home game in 40 some years.
Oh,
you're going to tell You're going to tell them that they can't come. I mean, I wouldn't want to be put in that position.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be to have to make that call. And I think you're right. I don't know the number off the top of my head either, but like if they were just to say we're not putting single game tickets on sale, like that doesn't solve Nebraska's problem.
Right.
Like the number is big enough there that you would still have to limit if you were at a place where you're, significantly a limited capacity. And at that point, you almost just have to have a lottery. And if you're a season ticket holder, you can come to game 2, but not game 1 and not game 3,
right.
and then you'll be back. It's I don't envy the people trying to work this out.
Yeah, I think though, if I'm put into the situation and the craziness that we've been dealing with, and you're going to say, hey, you got 7 home games, you're able to come to 4 of them, I would think the majority of the people are like, yes, we'll take that. Thank you. We just want football. We're going to do what we have to do to make this thing work. That'd be I would think that's how most people would think, just be happy to be able to go and have football for once.
I agree. I think should we get to that point, I think there'll be a pretty good deal of understanding and kind of good Samaritanship, for lack of a better term. Like people know, they're realistic about it. Everybody is passionate and wants football, of course, but I think it would be okay. Like if you ask people, here's your season tickets, you can only come to 4, maybe give them the option to opt in and just pay for the entire season. And people might be willing to do that just to kind of, because they care about the program and want to help the program and understand that, yes, Nebraska is kind of $100 million business, Nebraska athletics is, but
right.
It's always running, right to budget with that. So I think you'd be okay.
Yeah, I do. Well, there could be fans one way or another, and that's good for college football. And unless we're all in agreeing that college football is going to happen, and that's because I was a little concerned a month and a half ago. I'm like, oh boy, we got to get our crap figured out to make sure this happens. But so we got to move on. Let's talk about a little bit of Nebraska. And now that we know that football will be happening, let's get into a little optimistic versus pessimistic with Nebraska. Nebraska has arguably the toughest schedule in this coming season coming up in 2020. And what we've seen in the last couple of years, and then not be able to capitalize on a really nice schedule in 2019. Where does Brandon Vogel lie right now on the optimism or pessimism scale right now for 2020? Look at Nebraska's schedule.
I lean more towards optimism, and then there's a couple of reasons for that. Offensively, they have returning production numbers that would lead you to believe, for any team in the country, that they're poised to be better on offense. And I think that's really important for how this team's constructed. Not that they don't care about defense. I'm certainly not saying that, but for them to be operating efficiently, that offense has to be putting up points. That's kind of what they're built to do. And I think they've got a good shot at that. Whether or not J.D. Spielman is part of the team, hampers that a little bit just as your leading receiver. But, any one guy, it's tough. He'd be one of Nebraska's 2 or 3 best players, unquestionably. Losing him would be a little bit of a hit, but I still think you get the offensive line coming back. That's a really big one. So offensively, I'm pretty optimistic. Defensively, there might be some bumps in the road just with what they have to replace. But I think overall, Nebraska, I was just doing some work on this recently. Nebraska's played 12 one-score games in the last 2 years, and that's the 3rd highest in the country. I mean, you look at that. So that's an entire season of one-score games that could go either way. And in fact, you average it all out, and it's 50-50. Nebraska's 3-9. At some point, that has to change. Doesn't mean it's going to be this year, but I think it leads me to think that's more likely that they'll get some of those games this time around.
Yeah, let's stick with the offense side of the ball. Is there one position group that you are most optimistic about that leads you to believe that this offense is ready to finally take off?
Yeah, I think the offensive line, which I think for me, given the choice Like if you said, okay, pick one position group to feel the best about, it's either quarterback or offensive line on that side. It's not that they're ready made yet. And it's not that they've got surefire All-Americans up there, or even, surefire all-conference linemen in a league like the Big Ten. But they're experienced. They've been together for a bit. You've got some new additions or players coming off red shirts that I think could push some guys at the right spots. So if they can be good there, that is what kind of makes me the most optimistic about it. I was encouraged by Dedrick Mills' finish to the season. It feels like Nebraska and he himself kind of showed that I'm up for this. I'm a guy who can get a ton of carries and be a 1,200-yard rusher if I have the opportunity. I kind of wrote last year going into the year when things were really optimistic for a lot of people that if the run game takes a step back, it's going to be really hard for this offense. And, it doesn't happen very often, but the run game took a step back and it was really problematic. They've got to be able to run the football. And that's true for football in general, of course, but I think it's really true for this offense. So you think about it as no huddle, up tempo, like they want to put points all over, but it is really a ground-based offense.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, that would be, I agree with you. O-lines, you got so many people that played so many snaps, and you do have the Bryce Benharts being able to be plugged in there, and you saw Hymas and the Farniaks, and you just go down the line, and you get that group rocking and rolling, and it's just simple as that. You get your offensive line makes everyone around you so much better. You get Juergens another year under his belt, center, get his athletic, with his athletic ability. Yeah. How about the tight end group? Do you think we're going to finally start seeing some introduction to the tight end play? You get the transfer that's going to be eligible out of Rutgers. I'm missing his name right now, but that has just been missing. Ever since. Let's be honest. I mean, Stephen Carter was with the Mike Riley era, but we really haven't seen a whole lot of tight end play. And I know as a defensive guy, when you get a good tight end and the matchup capabilities you have, that can provide some issues. We just haven't seen that. How do you feel about the tight end group?
Yeah, pretty optimistic there. So Jack Stoll to me is kind of like the known. You know what you've got there, accomplished player. Austin Allen sort of came on late last year. I was really encouraged by some of the things I've seen there. And then with Travis Vokalek, the Rutgers transfer, kind of, it's all hearsay at this point because we haven't seen him play for Nebraska yet, but was pretty good for some Rutgers offenses that really didn't have a lot of weapons. And you look at this and you kind of go back and look at what this offense did at UCF, and tight ends were such a big part of that. I mean, especially with Nebraska I know they brought in some recruits to help with this, but with a smaller receiving core, like you just need those downfield guys and up seam guys. And I think they've got 3 guys, that can legitimately be that. And then Chris Hickman, who's probably going to line up mostly at wide receiver, but will still play some tight end, is super athletic. It's just a long group with a lot of potential. We need to see it. I do think this could be the year where we see one of those guys jump up there and, get 20 or 30 catches and they average 15 yards a catch and maybe end up with 4 touchdowns. So they're doing a lot on, a few touches really.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always puzzled me why you just don't see the more production. I get it, guys have to be able to perform in practice and then you have to be able to trust them in the games, but man, it's just that missing link. It just always the great teams, sure you can look at the Alabamas, the Clemsons, and the 2 teams lately, but they've always had just a guy that's just can stretch the field, provide, can line them up, split out for the red zone situations. Again, I always like to compare to what Rob Gronkowski, and obviously Rob Gronkowski is, maybe a Hall of Fame type, or, had a Hall of Fame type career and coming back now with Tampa Bay. But you have the good tight end able to what you do with your offense and what they put on the defense, and it's an absolute game changer. And maybe Nebraska hasn't had the consistency yet to get to that, but I got to be thinking year 3, you got to start seeing some production.
I think so. And, it's strange kind of going back. Like, I don't feel like Nebraska's lacked for tight end talent. Ben Cotton was good tight end. Kyler Reed was a guy who like really enticing in terms of his versatility and athleticism, and never quite got as many touches as I thought he could have. And Stephen Carter, that was kind of like the story of his career. So they've got a group of guys now that can fill a variety of roles. So it's kind of is there some sort of tight end curse that's been happening at Nebraska for the past decade, or has it just been waiting for the right thing to come together? And I guess we'll find out.
Let's assume JD Spillman does not come back and play. I can't make my mind up. I see videos of him training here in Lincoln or Omaha or wherever, and I'm like, wow, is he? What's his plan? Let's assume he doesn't play. How does that affect this wide receiver group with Manning coming in, Betts coming in, Wan'Dale Robinson coming back? How do you feel about that group? But knowing that O-line group's going to be really, really good and provide Adrian, hopefully another half second to a second back there.
Yeah, I think the expectation is Omar Manning, Xavier Betts, and maybe a couple other guys. They got to be ready to play right away anyway. And if Spielman is not back, that only underscores that. It probably means a bumpier road early on if you've got a lead on those guys, especially, it's just tough. It's tough for freshmen. I mean, it's a little bit easier at wide receiver. If you're an athlete, go make some plays. It probably puts more pressure on the run game to be good right away, to just kind of try and relieve some pressure that way. And teams have to account for that as like your primary weapon. It sure makes throwing the ball a lot easier, which I think is part of the reason, we saw kind of reduced numbers for Adrian a little bit last year in the passing game. It's not the sole reason, but I think that was part of it.
Yeah. Running back room, we saw the resurgence of Dedrick Mill end of the year, but it's another thin room, a lot of young guys.
Yeah.
Could see a lot of true freshmen being played. We saw Ramir Johnson get some time last year, but you have guys like Sevion Morrison coming in. You have some red shirts that are coming off of injuries. That's going to be an interesting battle for that number 2 spot once they start practice here this summer.
Yeah, I think it's wide open, and that's a big role. Wan'Dale Robinson got some carries there last year, and I think what last year showed us is the more you can leave him at wide receiver, the better off he is. And that wasn't, he's a good runner. It's just putting that wear and tear on him. He's more comfortable being on the outside making those kind of plays. I think he'll do it if you ask him to. So that doesn't feel like a great option to me. Ramir Johnson probably would have had a pretty big leg up with spring football, but now it almost zeroes the scale again for those 2 true freshmen coming in. This is one of those positions that I thought, and they still could. Nebraska might be pretty active in the transfer market. With the pandemic, I think that kind of limited what a lot of kids were able to do there. So maybe that's coming. But yeah, it's tough because you got Mills and you've got 10 or 20 carries, whatever Ramir Johnson got last year, and that's about it.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see. I mean, we need a lot of young new faces, which we've seen plenty of young new faces come in there, but they're gonna be asked to do a lot. Let's switch to the other side of the ball. I've been really confident in O-line, but I would have to say you go to the D-line. I have to switch. I'm a little more pessimistic when you lose 3 starters and 3 guys that are going to be in NFL training camps come this summer. A lot of new faces, a lot of guys to replace. And we know defense is only as good as your D-line, just like your offense is only good as your O-line. Give me your thoughts on the D-line going into this year.
Yeah, it's pretty tough when you look at losing those 3. Ben Stilley's still there, and I think he can kind of be the heart and soul of that group. He's like the one known entity you have there, though. So beyond that, you're looking at Keen Green, a JUCO guy who got here late last year and redshirted, which could potentially benefit Nebraska in a big way this year, but who knows where he's at. You have Damian Daniels, who plays. The struggle, according to his coaches, has always been, can he be out there for 60 snaps? And then you look at the other defensive end, and I mean, the positions are pretty fluid for them up there. Guys play all over the place, but it's just, you got DeAndre Thomas coming back, and then you're probably looking at Ty Robinson, a
Yeah.
redshirt freshman, maybe showed the most potential, and you've got a couple redshirt sophomores who you're waiting to kind of make their presence felt. There's really question marks across the board there, minus Stilley.
Yeah, and it just doesn't seem. Whereas last year, the D line room seemed really deep. It doesn't seem as deep. You lose 3 guys that played a majority of the snaps last year, and you're just like, man, you have the guy like Casey Rogers. He's gonna have to step up. But yeah, I'm really excited to see what Ty Robinson does, because I'll be honest, the 10 snaps he got against Wisconsin, extremely impressed for a true freshman to come up there and play against arguably one of the best coached and technically sound offensive lines in the nation and hold his own in some of those goal line scenarios I was more than impressed with that situation. So I think the ceiling is extremely high for him, which again is, when you're dealing with young kids, is the capability to stay focused for 60, 70 snaps. It's really easy to come in there for 10 and keep your focus, but it's like you're going to get tired, and they have to learn how to play tired. And that's the biggest thing for young guys, is learning how to play tired. And that's what this D-line is going to face without, really this, other than Stilley, is just those key snaps. So the play, it's not about play 5, 6. It's about play 42, 43, 44, and 45 for this D-line. And that's way too many question marks for me right now.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I like Nebraska's secondary, which, theoretically, if it's as strong as I think it could be, can help with the pass rush a little bit. But, Nebraska's kind of glaring issue for much of the time it's been in the Big Ten is being able to hold up against the run. And this is not the defensive line where I point to immediately and say, oh, yeah, they're up for it. Doesn't mean they're not. It's just based on what we've seen and know at this point. I just can't say that.
Yeah. We know the secondary, you just hit on it. We know that's going to be the strength of defense. I definitely agree. How do you feel about the linebacker room? You lose Mo Berry. You have Colin Miller come back. You have Will Honus coming back. You have some JUCO recruits coming in this position. You have your outside guys, JoJo Doman, Caleb Tanner. How do you feel overall about those guys in that position group?
Yeah, that one's kind of square in the middle. I think what I'm looking for there is a clear difference maker. I think Honus and Miller have both been solid at times and can be guys that, are good and reliable starters. But on the outside, it's been a struggle for this staff. They just haven't had kind of the prototypical guy that I think they want. Caleb Tanner maybe looks that way, but he's still obviously coming along and has a ways to go. This almost feels like it's go time this season or never for him. And JoJo Doman he makes some splash plays, but in talking to the coaches, his tendency to freelance occasionally gets him into trouble. So you got to balance that. And otherwise they've got some young guys coming in that maybe have a chance, because I just other than those 2 inside linebacker spots, I don't feel like a lot's settled. And I think they're okay there. You're just looking to take that next step. They need somebody to come out and be significantly better than what we've seen before, or that needs to come from somebody we haven't seen yet. And maybe Nick Heinrich, I know they're really high on him. Depending on how his recovery from injury has gone, he could be a guy that enters the mix there, but there's quite a bit to be decided for them too. So really you're looking at kind of the front 7 for me, where there's some big questions to answer.
Yeah, that's not good in this conference. It's not good in any football you play, but when your front 7's unsettled, man, that's tough to play good defensive ball. One guy that I don't think is getting enough, maybe he's getting some recognition, but Luke Reimers at that linebacker spot. Yeah. I am really excited to see what he does. If he can stay healthy, in talking with Barrett, he's like, this kid could be, how many true freshman walk-ons get a chance to play? I don't know. You have maybe some statistical information in front of you that I don't. I can't recall hardly any true freshmen that come in and play. And I still have that play. And they played, and I know Maryland was not any good, but that play, we have not seen a burst like that out of a linebacker in many, many years, where he just came and put his foot in the ground and went and made a TFL. And I'm like, whoa, that's different. And I'm just, that speed and that pop and that athleticism at that position has been missing. And quite impressive from a true freshman walk-on out of Lincoln, Nebraska. And I'm really excited to see what he's able to do.
Yeah, it's a good point. I I think he does get overlooked a little bit because he's a walk-on. But like you said, like a true freshman walking on and playing, like that doesn't happen. Like,
No.
I mean, I know Nebraska's walk-on tradition is storied, but it was still usually a multi-year process, and the guy had a lot of work to do to get there. Like a guy just walking in off the street in Lincoln and being ready to play in the Big Ten is crazy. And I myself am guilty of often kind of overlooking exactly what that probably says about him. So pretty high on him as well.
So we've almost hit on all position groups. Do we dare talk about special teams after last year?
There's not much to talk about in terms of kicking. Like, it's going to be somebody new. We know that.
Right.
They seem to have brought in almost every kicker that's available. Super interested in the Australian punter. We've seen, like, it's just crazy. Those guys have come in and like totally revolutionized college punting and seem to be up for the Ray Guy Award every year. Somebody from Australia. I think they've won 5 of the past 6 in Australian. So that's interesting. They just bring a different skill set, you know, with having played Australian rules in
Right.
rugby. So that'll be interesting, but you know, it's tough. Like, you could see the impact of like Nebraska not being able to attempt a field goal basically between the 30 and the 20. Like, you get down to that middle ground where if you got a solid kicker, you're like, okay, we can get points out of this. And like, it's not just the field goals that they missed last year, it's the ones that they never even tried. And those drives that ended up empty. You know, I know the coaching staff has said before, like, they feel like special teams cost them 2 games, and it's pretty easy to get there. Pretty easy to get there based on what they had. You know, still waiting for the return game has been a thing for Nebraska. Like, it always seems like they've got plenty of options for that, but you're still waiting for somebody to kind of DeJuan gross it and come and, you know, just take control and be like, clearly I am the guy. So that's a little bit up in the air too. Punt coverage, at least based on yards per return, was good last year. I guess that's a starting point.
It's got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't even know. It's just going to take more of a concerted, more of an effort from everyone. You know, I look back to, help me out here, what year was it when Nebraska struggled special teams wise, but Bo really took, it was Pelini years, and he took a big effort on it. And then you see DeMornay Piersonell, and he had all those. That was at 2013, 14. I can't remember.
Right around there.
Yeah, that he, you know, because they were terrible, they were bad, and he said, you know, enough, and then they finally got some things going. I just, you know, I think the staff has learned the hard way, and knowing that you can't win football games 57 to 56 to 42 like you might be able to in Conference USA or even the Pac-12. Let's be honest. That it's the field position, it's the hidden yardage, it's those hidden points. Though that can cost. I mean, that can easily be different between 5 and 7, or 8 and 4, or, you know, like you said, all those one score games. There's maybe 4 more wins. You know, and now instead of staying your tails at home for the last 2 Christmases, you're in bowl games. You know, and that's where special teams makes that difference. And it's not sexy. It's definitely not sexy to do and talk about, but you got to have it. Yeah,
you know, so in the past couple of weeks, I've spent a lot of time putting together kind of the opponent and Big Ten previews for the 2020 yearbook that comes out later this month. And I always do like the offense stats first and then the defense. And I'm like pulling together Iowa's offensive stats. And like, these are terrible. I was like, how did Iowa win anything, much less double-digit games? And then you pull the defensive stats. You're like, okay, well, you know, they only averaged 3.8 yards a carry, but they only gave up 2.9. So it's all about the differential. And it's not, you know, some teams do it with more offense, some teams do it with more defense, and the Big Ten is a conference that leans more towards the latter, which is a challenge for Nebraska. And I think how they, you know, were structured, well, how this staff structured UCF and did the amazing things they did there with them.
Yeah, it's always interesting which, you know, how the cookie crumbles. But you teased it a little bit before we say goodbye. Talk a little bit about the yearbook that's scheduled here to come out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, so that's scheduled to ship June 19th. pretty excited about it. You know, with when the pandemic kind of came down, we made the choice to suspend publishing for 2 months. You know, we could have put out issues, but it was kind of we didn't want to put out issues without sports that kind of weren't up to what I think our readers have come to expect. But previewing a football season is always kind of a long range out thing. And so I'm super excited for people to just have something in their hands again. I mentioned the team previews, like it's probably the least read part of the yearbook, but I really, really think about those kind of year round and like, how do we boil down? Like, okay, I just want to know like how Iowa wins games. So you try to do that in just a couple hundred words and make it short and readable. And so, you know, like if you don't know anything about Rutgers, you can flip to Rutgers page and get a pretty good gist of it. So there's that. We of course go through position by position, like a lot of what we did here, and then a ton of great features in there. Mike Babcock wrote about football during World War II, which was, you know, another time where a lot of programs were faced with, do we keep playing or do we not? Most of them did, but there were a bunch of smaller programs that weren't that small at the time, but like Marquette, Creighton, like all those football programs ended like around then. So it's kind of an interesting, you know, way to look at our current time a little bit. Aaron Sorensen wrote a great profile on DiCaprio Boodle. Greg Smith wrote a great profile on Wan'Dale Robinson, kind of going into his upbringing in Kentucky and why he was able to be ready to go right away. Jacob tackling the offensive line, which is always kind of a popular topic in Nebraska. And then Derek has a really great feature on Nebraska's move to the Big Ten kind of 10 years later. And, you know, he talked to people like Harvey Perlman and a bunch of the big time players involved in that. But my favorite part of that story personally is like he got to talk to Tim Beck and Coach Papuchis, you know, guys who really didn't have a reason to say yes to that interview because, you know, it was a while ago, but like they really offered some insight into like just what it was like going from we play a Big 12 schedule to the next year. You've got 11 new teams on the schedule. You've got a totally different style of play. Like there were things in there that really made me rethink kind of what I used to think about that time.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I just read that. I can't wait to get my hands on one of those because I'll never forget. You know, being around here still and still trying to play and training and talking to the coaches there and get to know them more on both staff. And they're just like, especially on the defensive staff, you know, and JP and Kaz, the D-line coach, and they're like, people will never understand how hard it is to beat Northwestern. They look at Northwestern as some private small school in Chicago, but they don't know how hard it is to beat them year in and year out because how they play. And they don't get credit enough for this, but you beat them, you don't get much credit for it. When you lose, you look like, you know, you're not a very good football team. But he goes, Fitzgerald is a freaking magician on getting those teams ready. And he goes, I wish people understood how hard it was to beat them week in and week out. And it just opened your eyes a little bit more because everyone thought Nebraska would come to the Big Ten and really take over other than maybe, you know, Michigan and Ohio State. But that's obviously been far from the case.
Yeah, I think that was part of it, you know, so they come in that first year and like the media, those jerks like myself, like pick Nebraska to win right away. So that didn't help. But like one of the things that like, I mean, I guess I kind of knew this, but had forgotten it. Like one of the coaches mentioned, we beat every team in the Big Ten in those first 2 seasons. So like, you know, Michigan, Ohio State, they had a win over everyone. And you're kind of like, oh yeah. And, you know, just you get into the week to week of the season and you have a loss to Northwestern, which feels like the end of the world. And it's just interesting to revisit that with a fresh set of eyes. Speaking of Northwestern, I'm super high on Northwestern for 2020. Like their defensive numbers last year didn't budge at all. Like they were the same, like, you know, tooth and nail group that they always are. Their offensive numbers were atrocious, but they were so bad they almost like have to bounce back. And adding Peyton Ramsey, former Indiana quarterback, like they're going to be trouble. I think that's Nebraska's first road game, and it's going to be every bit as tough as we should know Northwestern games are now.
Yeah, that is for sure. All right, Vogues, man. I appreciate you taking the time out and joining me. This will be the first of many discussions we'll have here, I'm sure. And enjoy your time down in Tennessee. And I can't wait till we can touch base here back in Lincoln when football finally starts to get rock and rolling. So appreciate the time, my man.
Yes, thanks a lot.